Hey, it's Friday night, 7 o'clock. Do I got some light? Yeah, got some light. What's up? No, I don't have any light. Okay, I'm here. It's live. We're a little after 7. I had to go to a football game tonight, so that was awesome. I got to, got to go see my boys play sports. It's awesome stuff. So we're live tonight. We're going to talk about a couple things. One, I just posted a video tonight comparing a 468 big block Chevy to a 496 big block Chevy, kind of like a, if you look at it in LS terms, it would be a 5.7 versus a 383, or a 4.8 versus a 5.3, or 5.3 versus a 6.0. Any of the bigger is better kind of thing. And as we know, in terms of motors, although there are lots of guys that root for the underdog, and I'm one of them. I really like the 4.8, and I like when people do cool stuff with that. But if you're trying to make power, especially if you're trying to make more torque, having a bigger motor definitely helps. So on an LS, a 5.3, if you get a 5.3 instead of a 4.8, it's going to be more powerful. And in this case, on the big block stuff, what I was trying to show, more than just we know bigger motors make more power, make more torque, but more on the big block thing is that, we got to thinking, okay, we have a junkyard 454, like a Gen 6 motor, and that's what we all started. Well, what's up, ProCharge Mopar, Jason, Mitch, whatever, what's up, Stango Niner? We get like a junkyard 454, and we look at it, go, okay, look, what I'd really like to do is these things are kind of limited in how much camshaft we can run. They just don't have enough piston to valve clearance. So what it needs is a piston. So it needs a piston that has valve release. So, well, if you're going to put a piston in it, you put a piston in it that also is not a flat top or a dish piston, something that's going to add compression. So we use the 18 to 22 cc kind of dome piston. That brings it in kind of the sweet spot for, static compression for street use on pump gas. So, somewhere in the 10-to-1 range or so, depending on what chamber size you're going to use. And it got me thinking, well, if a lot of guys put, I don't know how many guys are going to put just a forged piston in. A lot of guys are going to put rods and pistons in. Okay, well, if you do a rod and a piston, why didn't spend another $300 or whatever it costs to put one of these inexpensive cast stroker cranks, like a Scat, like a 9000 series, or even just a cast steel one, because they work really well. And honestly, I've never broken a crankshaft, even a cast one. Look at what we did with all the LS stuff and the factory cast cranks. I mean, we made over 1,500 horsepower. And it used to be back in the day, because I can remember doing this way back and thinking, well, every performance motor, like a 302 Ford, a 351, a small block Chevy, any kind of performance motor, are you going to make 400 horsepower? You have to have a steel crank. That is a mandatory thing. Until you stop and realize, like, how many tests have you run where you've broken a crank from power? Like, you've twisted the thing because you made so much cylinder pressure and you made so much torque that it just broke the crank because it just gave up. It just didn't have enough strength. I've yet to ever see that happen. I'm certain that there's a limit to what these stock things can take, but I just don't think that we're anywhere near it in most of our normal operations. And certainly in this big block test, it was exactly that. I mean, if you're going from look what we do with the junkyard 454. So if we run boost on them and we make 1,000 horsepower, which we do all the time, and that's a cast crank. And even if it's a factory steel one, that's fine. And you go to a cast one, again, you're not going to break that, especially on an NA combination. So going from so it got me thinking, well, it's a cheap upgrade then to if I'm going to get rods and pistons, why wouldn't I just do the crank and then you have a bigger motor? Instead of going to, like, just everyone, if you go to a bigger, a piston, you're going to put a piston in it. You're not going to put a standard bore because, you might as well bore it a little bit. And so most guys are going to go 30 or 60 over on a big block. Why just go all in and just make a 496? Because just like if you're putting together a big block now, you would never do a 396. Unless you're doing a dedicated L78 build or, something that's like a numbers matching deal, or you want to have a 396, which is also cool. There's also a reason to do that. But if you're putting together a motor that you want to make power, you don't pick a 396 or a 366. You pick instead of a 396, you pick a 496 or a 596 or just anything that's going to be bigger, because if you're going to build something, you might as well build something that's going to, that's why we get a big block. And that's why I said in the video that That's the reason that you pick a 396 over a 350, because it's bigger, and the reason why you pick a 427 over a 396 and a 454 and then a 496 and so on and so on. So if you're going to go big, you should go big. I mean, that's why we do it. And since a 496 weighs roughly the same as a 396, and if it's an aluminum headed version, that might weigh even less. So why not get all the extra cubic inches if the weight's going to be the same, and you're going to have a lot more power. And the thing that's cool is if we liken this back to the LS stuff, a 5.3 is not going to just make more power, it's going to make more torque, like from where guys like it, like from 1,000 RPM all the way up to 6,000 or 7,000 RPM. The 5.3 is just going to be a bigger, better motor. And the same thing with a big block. You know, if you have a 496, it's going to make more power than a 468, certainly a lot more than a junkyard 454. So let me know what you guys think. This carries over to anything, to a 2J motor like the 4200, inline 6-cylinder, the big block Buick, you know, anything, anything that you want to make more torque with. And whoever says, you know what I'd really like? I wish I had a motor that just made less torque. I mean, this is just more torque than I can deal with, and I don't want that. I don't remember talking to anybody and having them say that. So let's see what you guys are doing. Can we get some take about big blocks in our truck for towing our race cars? Yes, that's what I was saying. Make it bigger. If you have a 454 and you want more torque, make it a 496. That's a really good way to go. And then you can even use a mild cam and all of that, and it works really well. Yeah, yes, Jasper, I have some more plans on doing stuff on the Buick 455. Work on the Nova I haven't done anything with that for a little while. Brazil, I was just bragging to my mom today, who I took to a football game, talking about the great people down in Brazil. Let's see, just pulled my 6-liter apart for ring gap. Turns out it had 41 thousandths ring gap. That seems like a lot. Was it smoking or anything? Was it running? Switching from a 496 to a 540 by the end of the month. That's a good upgrade. I want to do a cast. I would love to see a test video on twin turbo eBay kit for a small block Ford. I ran the CX Racing twin turbo kit, so that was kind of a complete kit. The reason that people do kits, though, is they're usually chassis specific, and so it's not always possible for us to do that on the engine dyno. Sometimes it just doesn't fit the way that we have to configure the engine dyno. Shout out from Florida. Is it worth it to splay the caps on a 2-bolt 455? I don't know why you would need to, unless you're trying to get crazy power. If you were, then you're probably going to use an aftermarket block anyways. LS style cranks are much stronger than old school cast cranks. Love to see an 8.1 make an appearance on your channel, even though I know that only aftermarket heads are from Radar. But we can always boost it. I'd like to do an 8.1 too. I just haven't run across one in the wrecking yard yet. Balance costs more, clearance the block. Yeah, sometimes you do have to do that with stroker stuff. 454 SS into a 496 SS. That's a good combination. 366 with rec port heads. That's what they all need, because then that 366 is going to rev, right, Tim? Isn't that why we do the smaller motor, so that we can spin the RPM up? Can you put LS rods in a 454? No, I don't think that's the same size. I took the night off from wrenching, almost ready for reassembly, where all the hard work pays off. Yeah, it's all about prep. CA 434 Marks here for 4,200 power. Beyond my diminishing driving skills. Yeah, the LS rod is not the same dimension as a big block. Length or width or journal diameter, any of that stuff, right? Started on my New Edge Mustang today in Oregon. I was talking to my mom about people in Oregon, people up close to, we used to go skiing during the winter. We'd go to Mount Bachelor up in Bend, Oregon. Stay at the end of the 7th mountain. Why did the big block go away? Oh yeah, diesels get better mileage when they're boosted. What about a 4565 bore with a 375 stroke? Yeah, that works too. It's hard to get really big bores unless you start having like altered bore center blocks. Do you have dyno runs from a 302 with a box intake like a Cartech? Yeah, I do. I have to go dig them up, but the box intakes, and I also ran the Trick Flow one. I know I have those because that's relatively recently. The Cartech stuff and the Hartman box, which Comp had, I also ran those, but they do what you'd expect. They lose a lot of low speed torque because they get rid of a bunch of runner length. Nick wants to know if you took the 496 and it was 13-to-1 compression, so it was, and had 750 lift. Cam and the same head you ran on your test, how much more power would it make? The 750 lift, you wouldn't want to put 750 lift in that cam because that would have a lot of ramp rate. If you were going to do a 750 lift, or I probably would go more than that, the cam that we would normally go to for something like you're talking about there on a 496 would be like a 275, 282, and it would be mid to high sevens on the lift and 13-to-1. There's no reason. I think the guys at West Tech would be up closer. They have one. They have a 496 like that with an airflow head, and I think it made a little over 800. I want to pull my 4.6 and swap in a K24. That's good, and then add boost. Why are a lot of the old small block guys using Dart Iron Eagles? I don't know. I've tested that head, and it's not fantastic. I mean, it works, and it's better than a Fuelie head certainly, but it's not as good as some of the other stuff that's out there. LS1 intake or truck intake. The LS1 intake, the factory LS1 intake, is the least performance oriented LS intake that they made. The LS6 is better, the early truck is better, the Trailblazer SS is better, the LS2 is better, everything else is better than that LS1 intake. So that should be your last choice. Just upgrading from 317 to 706. That's a good upgrade. Rec port intake on oval port heads. Yes, you can do that. We've run that a lot. In fact, the Mercury Marine stuff came like that. Gonna rebuild my junkyard LQ4. Should I go back with dish pistons or flat tops? We'll only have 91. I'm planning on boosting it to 60 horsepower. Now, I like a flat top piston. You could put a small dish in it too. A 10cc dish is fine. What header are you going to use on that? Yeah, Mark pointed out that they might be running that cast head in a class racing, like some circle track stuff. They only allow cast head, so that might be a good option. How much compression can I run on 93 octane pump gas, aluminum head 496? That's going to depend a lot on your camshaft that you run. If you put a really big cam in it, then you can run a lot of static compression, but you're going to be balancing those two. Also, what you do to the head can make a difference also. Polishing the chamber, softening the chamber. There are a lot of things that you can do. The other thing that happens is if you have a really small chamber and you can get closer to a flat top style piston to get that compression, that will also affect the detonation. But most of those 496s are going to have some kind of dome on them. New York's in the house. Any real benefit from using a 904 bush lifter in a small block, world block supercharged? A lot of guys will bush those so that, and make sure that they're lined up properly, because sometimes the lifter bore is not lined up with it's not really centered on the cam lobe. So sometimes that's beneficial. And then if you're, I think that probably would be the only reason for alignment. Do you see your channel as a hobby or a cry for help? I can only choose one of those options. Is that what you're saying? The LQ4 head that came with, it's a Scuba would be a 317. If it was an LQ4 or an LQ9, it's gonna have a 317 head on it. What's your opinion on the 862 head? It works the same as a 706 head, and it works really, really well. It's the best factory head that you can put on a 4.8, a 5.3, and in my opinion, the best factory head that you can put on a 5.7 as well. When are you going to do the Big Bang Gen 6 454? I don't know. Soon, hopefully. What do you think about the 8.1? I would really like to test that. I've got a 50 Buick, and I'm thinking about a 455. Who specializes in Buick engines? The guys from TA Performance are the guys that you want to look up for Buick stuff. John, do you mean 862 heads could make good power with a little work? They could make good power even stock if you're talking about an 862 head. And I've run lots of their ported versions from the guys from Total Engine Airflow, and that's a really good head when it's ported. Would the LT1 cam from the late 90s Camaro fit the 305 block from a 91 IROC and a budget price? The cam will actually go in, but it has something on it that's different than the Vortec does. It's going to take a different cam gear, I think. I just bought a set of GT40P heads, and everyone says I have to get a special headers. Yes, that is true. Best heads for Mark IV 454 for towing, OEM or aftermarket suggestions. The cheap way is to go with the stock one. Go with an oval port head, maybe even a Gen 6 version, because it has a really small chamber if you want to bring the compression up. Or the head that I like for a 454, especially for towing, if you're going to get an aftermarket head, is that Airflow Research 265 oval port head. Need metal. I'm curious about the dimple port heads. I just don't believe in that. I don't think that it will make the difference between it won't make a difference the way that a ported head makes a difference over a non-ported head. And I don't know that dimpling the ports does anything. I'd like to. I want somebody to show me a back-to-back test where it actually did that. Joe, I'm running 1.8 rockers with an aluminum metal block performer head. Just couldn't find a cam and sock anywhere with a small enough lift to clear the pistons. Joe, the lift is not what's going to affect piston to valve clearance. That's going to be duration. What do you think about the cryogenic metal treatment and WPC coating? I've never tested it, so I can't really tell you. Uncle Tony's Garage does a Wednesday night live show. His co-host is a big Buick guy. Cool. What pickup do you use on a Mark IV big block in order to use the Holley system for fuel injection? We just use a distributor. We use a MSD. .540 twin turbo 80 millimeter AFR. That's a good combination. If you try to run a standard header on the GT40P head, you're going to run into plug or wire clearance problems is normally what happens. What's the first engine you did technical testing on? The first story I ever wrote I mean, I did testing before I started writing for magazines. So I worked on my own small block 350 that I had in my 1970 and a half split bumper rally sport. So that probably was the first motor that I did work on that I can remember. Although before that, I did work on motorcycle engines because I had a couple of motorcycles before that. Jeffrey wants a 496 versus 502 versus 572, comparing the power with equal money. I don't know how we would do that. Mark, I might sacrifice a little compression, but ideally the combination would be to have a small chamber and a flat top rather than sacrificing anything at all. See, a 4.530 bore, a 4-inch stroke. I went with an F1A94. A set of GM Performance heads that have 250 intake. They flow 355. That's good. On your ignition, Corey, just put an MSD and an amplifier on it. That's going to be more than enough for that blower. That blower is about a 1,200 horsepower blower. John's in the house. Dimple porting is like snake oil. Yeah, you got to squeeze a snake really a lot to get the oil out of them. When you switch to roller rockers on a Ford, how do you adjust them? Not to zero lash. You adjust them the same way that you adjust like stock style non-bolt down rockers. We zero lash them and then put a half a turn in them usually. Have you ever tried a set of Higgins or CHI heads on a small block Ford? Yes, I've run CHI stuff. I've run their 3V heads. Mark, I don't know what the date is for the next trip to West Tech, but I just had them check and I had Troy check the bell housing, and it will not bolt onto the dyno. The center hole is way too big, which we can make a new centering ring for it. That's not a big deal. The bolt holes that bolt the bell housing to the transmission are completely different than the other stuff. So I just want to buy your adapter so that, and let me know how soon we can get that, and then we can schedule to get that motor up on the dyno. Can you mill a cylinder head to accept bigger valves? Well, you can machine it to accept bigger valves. Like that's a fairly common thing for guys to do on LS stuff, especially the 706 and 862 heads. A lot of guys put 2-inch valves in them. And I think that's what the guys from Total Engine Airflow did. But you don't want to just put bigger valves in them. You want to do the other things that are going to make that head take advantage of the bigger valve. Because a lot of times when you first start out, the valve size isn't the choke point. It's not what's stopping the head from flowing more. It might be the bowl. It might be some other choke point in the port. You need to look at the transition from the throat to the seat. There's a lot that goes on there. It's not just a simple thing. Oh, well, that valve is too small. It doesn't flow enough, so I need to put a bigger valve in it. that may or may not be it. Marcus, I already did a big bang on a Hemi. If you take a look, that video's up already. Red, are you a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke motorcycle guy? I've had both. Right now, I have a DT 125 Yamaha, which is a 2-stroke. And I've had various other motorcycles. I had a 500 Interceptor, a 600 Ninja, a 750 GSXR. I had a CL 100, which I think was my first motorcycle. And I also had, or I should say my old girlfriend back in high school had a DT 100, which I rode around a lot on and I love, which is why I had this 125, because I had such a good time on it. Richard, what is better, back cut valves or radius the corner? Honestly, I'd have to ask Brian about that. And I don't think that, like most things, that those two, that's an either or thing. I think that there might be situations for both of them. And I think that it's different on an intake and an exhaust valve. Also, you're going to want to do different things. Corey, you can do either one. You can use a boost timing retard like we did back in the day. What we do is just take timing out of it mechanically by turning the distributor and run it at a lower timing level. We also have a digital 7 on there that we can do timing retard with. Or if we're running it with a Holly, which we normally do with the distributor, then we can put in whatever timing curve we want. But if we're running it carbureted, then we usually do it manually. How well do you think a 287 Olds with a GT45 will do? Well, the GT45 will support 800 or 750 or so horsepower, let's say. So if the 287 has a cam in it and maybe ported heads or something, that's where you could get to. Do you believe that a 598 doesn't have the longevity as a smaller stroke like a 540? I don't think that that's the case. I think that has much more to do with the components that you use and how often you're revving it up really high and things like that, rather than just a function of the stroke. Is there a trick to getting stuck lifters out of an LS block? Sometimes they have to go out the bottom. I can't remember if we had to. I'm not sure we ever had to tap any out or not. I would try spraying them with stuff. And try rotating them. I don't know much about that small Olds engine, but all engines are the same. Will a pair of aftermarket shorty headers for a Fox body fit the GT40P heads? You need to get GT40P headers because you're going to try a lot of other shorty headers to get them to even work. We went through that back when we were racing World Challenge, and I had to, this was my trick because it kept burning the plug wire. So what I did was took silicone and applied it over hours and hours and hours and kept putting layers of the silicone on where it was going to burn the plug wire. So I was making silicone coated wires. So hopefully it would last long enough for us to finish the race, because we had P heads and we did not have P head headers. And that's what you need. Where's the best place to grab tack? You mean get a tack signal from? We get that from the distributor normally, or the coil. Brodex or AFR heads, 350 Chevy built for a daily. Either one of those are going to work for a daily driven 350. As a matter of fact, I don't even know why you'd need, if you're building a daily, why you would even spend the money on either one of those heads. There's a lot lower cost alternatives for that. And since you're not looking for making a ton of power, you're not going to be taking advantage of what either one of those heads can do for you. I mean, I'm a big fan of both of those heads, but not when you don't need them. I mean, if you're putting 500 horsepower heads on a 350 horsepower motor, and there's just no reason to do that when you can make the 350 horsepower for a lot less money. So Sean, that's the criteria, is what head do you recommend without having to change push rods? That's the go, no go thing, is the push rod length. That's going to be really hard. You're going to have to change push rods, even if you just change the rockers on it. Jeffrey, I've never seen a 461 head flow 300 CFM. I'm not saying that somebody hasn't done it, because there's lots of really talented guys out there, but I've never seen one flow that much. A KX500 is the fastest dirt bike I ever rode. I never rode one of those. I rode a TT500 back in the day, and it was more than I could handle. And I had recently I had a Suzuki 400, which was more than I needed also. And the other option with the GT40P heads is to get GT40, just regular GT40 heads. In the earlier Explorers, they didn't have P heads. They actually had GT40 heads. 500 Interceptors had some cam oiling problems. I never had any problems with mine. I've never had any problems with any Honda that I've had. See, this is my kind of guy. I can't say, but I want to stop in and give a thumbs up. See, just do a like, do whatever you got to do. Just do a drive by. That's all good. Thanks, Java. Make sure you, Dawson, get them halfway out, oil them, push them back in, get them halfway out, and they should start to free up. You've just got buildup probably on the bottom side, or they've worn and mushroomed a little bit, which also can happen. Yeah, the port, a head port doesn't work the way a spinning golf ball does. That's why the dipples work well on a spinning golf ball, and that's not the same thing that's happening. So I don't know how that's beneficial. The big block Chevy tunnel ram, that is something that Freiberger did, and I think that they had to they may have had to custom make the adapter plate to go between the blower and the tunnel ram. So I don't think it wasn't something that was off the shelf. The CHI heads are really good. We had 3V heads, and so take a look at what Kazi did with those heads back in Engine Masters. You know, he made 1 million horsepower with them, so they work really, really well. I think that they're as good or better than most Cleveland-based heads out there. So they have lots of potential, and as long as you have enough motor to take advantage of what they can do. Kroon's Racing Engines, what are my thoughts on ProMax big block Chevy heads? Take a look at the video that I have up on their big block Chevy heads, and they work very, very well. They're not quite what an Airflow Research head is, but lots of heads are not. But I mean, look, if you look at the cost difference between them, it's quite a bit. 400 horsepower is fine on cast pistons. We did 1500 on cast pistons, so 400, you're good. Would you put a heavier spring in a distributor to retard low-end timing so you don't break? If you're just trying to do ignition timing with springs and weights on a turbo application, that's going to be tough. But yeah, that's one way to do it. Is you can change the weights and you can change the springs in it to soften the curve up so it doesn't come on till later. Dirty Boy, yes, I have checked out Calvin's thing. I check out his stuff all the time. I saw he just posted something on the adapters to allow you to run the later. So if anybody hasn't taken a look, take a look at Calvin's channel that has the Studebaker and the Fairmont with the 4200 inline 6-cylinder. And he just posted one recently where he made adapters. I think he did 3D printing on them so that you can use the later 06 and up coil packs on the earlier motor, which is, I guess, one of the problems that the earlier ones are easy to see. It has the composite valve cover and it has the heat sinks in the coil packs, and people are telling us that those don't have as much spark energy as the later ones do. Dave, I don't do that. I don't follow the firing order or anything. I do one of them. I start on one side and I start at the beginning of the head and I go through all the revolutions to go through all of the valves. That's the way that I do it, so that it's easier for me to process that and to go in order. I don't follow timing or the firing order, because what happens is somebody's going to walk up and talk to me while I'm doing that. And so it's easier for me to remember where I am during the other chaos that's going on while I'm trying to adjust valves. I like to do that while I'm by myself and nobody's there late at night. So that's how I do it. Kevin wants to know the ideal big block Chevy size. There isn't one. If you want to make lots and lots of horsepower, it's easier to do it when it's bigger. But there's not. I don't know what your definition of ideal is. Is it the one that revs the highest? Is it the one that makes the most horsepower per cubic inch? Is it the one that takes the most boost? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Let's see here. On a 6.0, does having 20 thousandths more duration on exhaust over intake duration add more torque down low? Say 219. No, that will probably actually have the opposite effect. It's that having a lot more exhaust duration is probably going to add power at the top and take away power at the very beginning of the curve. No, you don't have to use a lock distributor with a digital 7. I don't think. We use a lock distributor when we're running EFI, but not on the digital 7. A few layers of pressed aluminum foil works amazing at heat shielding. Aluminum is not a very good insulator. It's a really good conductor, though. Hey, Richard, wonder what a good replacement cam would be to make more power under 6,000 RPM. I currently have an XE274 and a 454. I'm wondering if there's a better option for 2,000. 2,000 to 6,000, first of all, is a really, really big range. So the cam that you have right now probably works fairly well for that range. $350 L31 head for a daily driver. Yeah, that would be a better choice, Mark. I agree. That's why I was suggesting not using a Brodix or an AFR head. I would put a Vortec head in it. It would work really well. Cincinnati's in the house. Cincy, yo. Yeah, Jeffrey, I remember reading something about the 461 stuff that some of them had bigger ports in them, but still, even with 190 cc intake port, if you look at what it takes to get 300 CFM, it's a lot. Michael, what do you think would be the best combination for the money? 2 GT45s or a single equally priced turbo? It depends on what you're trying to do. The GT45s are really, really cheap. So those can make 12 or 1,300 horsepower. I don't know that you'd be able to do that for that price. If you want to make 1,000 horsepower, there are other ways to do that. You could do it with a single S475 or 7875 Gen 2, anything. There are lots of those kinds of turbos. It depends on how much power you want to make. A Harley Davidson. I've ridden a few Harley Davidsons too. The one that I rode the most was an 883, belonged to somebody else, but he let me go ride it down to the beach with my then girlfriend. It was pretty fun. But I like the GSXR and the Interceptor and the Ninja a lot more than I like the Harley Davidson. What would you recommend for a fuel pump? I can't help you on the fuel pump. A distributor spark controller for a Gen 5 496 with a blow-through carb and 85 for 1,000 horsepower. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. Tim, maybe Tim would have a recommendation. I'm trying to think what we run when we do carbureted stuff. We just turn the distributor back, but that's not a good idea. It would be better to have a little more timing out of boost. Maybe a boost timer retard would be the way to go. And the controller is not going to work. James, with the 2002 Silverado with 799 heads, cam headers wouldn't go into closed loop. Owner didn't install the primary O2 sensors. I was lost for all until I figured it out. Oh, see, that's good information. The KTM 540 two-stroke. Yeah, the two-stroke stuff is pretty cool. I got to ride an RD 400 for a long time back when I was in high school, and that was a cool bike. Did those Formula 5000 cars, they used 461X heads, Tim? They used iron heads? I would have thought that they would at least use aluminum heads. Even back then, they could have had Brodix or Brownfield or any of those. Have you ever tried Phytech fuel injection? The guys at Westech have. I've never run it, though. .5 horsepower per cubic inch is doable NA on an Oldsmobile 455 V8. Cam intake and headers. 1.5 is a good number. You have a pretty Warfighter has a pretty neat carb from Phytech. So did they sell carburetors too? Oh, a 2-square throttle body. Okay, fuel injection, that makes more sense. Is the Phytech the one that has the don't they have the ECU encased in the throttle body as well? Intake runner entry discussion anytime soon. Like, Mark, what did you want to talk about? The runner entry on the cylinder head? That's usually the least important part of the intake man, or the least important part of the cylinder head, unless you're talking about an intake manifold. How corrosive have you found E85 to be? Would a stock Holly disintegrate in a week, or would it take like 3 years? I don't think it would do that. We did find, after running E85 in carburetors, we took one apart. We just took the bowls off of it because we were doing jetting on it, and we found a lot of like soot or like particulate matter in the bowls, which is from the E85. So that's something to look at and make sure that we did a video on it, and it got a lot of, I think Brule also did one, and it got an awful lot of views on it. People like seeing stuff like that, like seeing the soot hiding back in the corner of the bowl. But you want to make sure that you check that stuff, because what happened was that it got run with E85 and then probably got left E85 in the bowl, and they just sat and then left the debris in there. So that's not a good idea. Aluminum is a terrific reflector, though. Convex heat, great. So it reflects it, and have you tried Patriot aluminum square port heads on the big block Chevy? I don't think I've run Patriot big block heads. So it reflects it and conducts it. I'm interested to learn about that. Rian, and what I mean is, a lot of times we lock the distributor so that it doesn't have any centrifugal advance. We'll lock it in place, and that's what we do when we run EFI on it, because you have to have the distributor not have also a centrifugal curve. You want to put the curve in when you're doing EFI. So the distributor has to be locked, and then it has to be positioned at the right spot according to what kind of EFI you're going to be using. Like, you might have you might want to set it at 50 degrees, and then everything else is retard from there. So there's an awful lot going on there. Oh, yeah. Steven said Patriot's the same as Promax. I think Promax bought the Patriot stuff and then redid it. The Promax stuff seems to work pretty well. And for a lot of on the locking distributor, we do that on a lot of carbureted applications. Because if you look at most performance distributors, if a guy puts a performance curve in a distributor, normally it's all in by 3,000 RPM. Well, if we're starting our load at 3,000 RPM on the dyno, distributors are all in anyway. So the distributor has full advance starting at 3,000. And on a carbureted application, a lot of times the ignition timing will be the same from 3,000 all the way to 6,500. You haven't ridden a hot rod Harley? No, I don't. I don't doubt that they're torque monsters. It's kind of like the big block of bikes, but they're just not fast in the way that a like a 1 liter bike is or a Hayabusa is. Do you have a shop at home? No, I don't have a shop at home. I have a backyard and a garage and stuff, but how come you're not porting cylinder heads? I'm not a head porter. I'm actually terrible at that. I've done a little bit of it, like Brian was showing me how to do the combustion chambers on the 706 head to unshroud the chambers, which is really kind of cool. Comp Cam's 292H versus ISKI 292 Mega comparison. That's kind of a old school one. Yeah, and I don't understand how guys port iron heads. That would, to me, would be a nightmare. I did some porting way back in the day when I worked for a company called Mustang Dynamics. I used to port the 5 liter Mustang. We would polish them externally so they were all shiny, but also polish the. We would enlarge the throttle body inlet to match to a 65 or 70 or whatever size throttle body or an EGR spacer we wanted to put on it. We'd also go in and port match and make as big as we could the everything that we could reach in the upper and the lower portions of the manifold and port the manifolds. It was not fun. Dawson, what's up? Is a 706 ported too small to make 600 horsepower for a 408? No, a stage 2 head from total engine airflow flows more than 300 CFM, so it's more than enough to make 600. And they have other ported versions too, but their ported 706 work really, really well. That was the first head that I did from Brian at Brian Tooley Racing, and he was at Total Engine Airflow at the time because he owned the place. And that head was really impressive because they make it into a bigger head basically. It ends up being much bigger. And I think that they put, I want to say it was a 20155 or so valve package in it. So it worked out very well. The Lundy doing a 460 build-up. There are a few 460 videos up that I have, and we did some mild ones, and we did some wilder ones, and we did some stroker ones, so you can take a look at those and kind of choose kind of what direction you're going to go. It's really easy and cheap to stroke those things, so you can make a lot of power that way. You know, if you have it in a big car or a truck and it's heavy, having the extra stroke in it and bore size on these things too, having extra displacement in it is going to help you a lot. Jeffrey, I need to look at the specs on those two cams. I probably could tell you which one's going to make more power, but I've never run both of those. Yeah, that would be a good big block Ford. P51 heads, 13-to-1 compression. Good cam and a Brawler 950. A hot mess. Take a look at the Promax stuff. That's pretty cheap. Oh, so Mark, you want to look at the entry of the intake manifold runner at the plenum. Simple radius, raised radius, ideal air entry on a stack. Well, there's a lot to talk about there, and maybe I should do a discussion on that or a video on that. There's a lot of theories on that. Having a full radiused air horn which is the thing that flows the most, but a lot of guys don't realize that having a full radius air horn also changes the effective reflected wavelength of that runner. And then you can also change the radius to improve torque. There are a lot of cool things that you can do to that. And then having it stood off from the floor, or having it level with the floor, or having it under the floor. There's lots of cool stuff that we can discuss. Although I haven't seen a lot of direct back-to-back testing because I know that if you look at a lot of the exotic stuff, like a lot of Ferrari, Lamborghini stuff, you look at their manifolds, which they're very, very good at their manifolds. A lot of those have like full radius air horns or trumpets inside the plenums, and the plenums are usually removable, and those are all stood off of the floor. So you're wondering, because everybody thinks about the airflow backwards, I call it. They think about the air as like being forced in, it rushes in, and then but it's going to go past the runner because the runner is up above the floor. It's going to go past the runner and hit the floor and cause all sorts of problems. That's not what's happening. The air is actually being drawn in through that runner, obviously from the downward moving piston, and it's taking that air from the plenum and it's creating a vacuum. And that vacuum is what's creating the air rushing in through the throttle body or the opening in the plenum. So it's kind of a different situation. Under boost, obviously, there's more of an argument to be made that you're forcing air in there and that different things are happening. Here's what I can tell you. No matter where that entry is, whether it's above the floor, whether it's on the floor, whether it's below the floor, whether it has a tapered entry at the floor going into the runner, the air will get in there. Nothing worth and porting and port matching. Oh, a 6-liter V10. Yeah, that would be even worse. Or 12 cylinder or 16 cylinder. That's why doing a rotary is nice. Troy, don't have the Patreon set up. That's my goal for April, though. Brad, the F1A94 is like a 12 or 1300 horsepower blower. So you could get that out of a big block if you really spin the thing up and have good gas in it, have an intercooler and all that. On pump gas, you're not going to get anywhere near what that blower can do because you just won't be able to run enough timing in it. You won't be able to run enough boost in it. A 454 and an S10 is perfect, especially with turbos on it. I know. I would like to have a Pontiac 400 to test, Anthony. That would be good. Yes, you can do a rotary cam swap with a Dremel. You can go from a bridge port to a peripheral port and a street port. You can go from like half race to 3/4 race to 7/8 race to where the thing won't idle at all. There's the argument. Is the air being drawn in or is it being forced in? And you'll get people that will argue back and forth about that like incessantly. That's a good deal for 700, Hot Mess. Put a window on your 4200 intake and try different entries. I don't know that a window is going to tell us what we need to do, especially if you're just flowing air in there. We'd have to smoke it or run water meth or something else on there. What I want to put the window on is I want to do an oil pan like that. Julius, what's up? I got about 5 minutes. I got to get going, guys. See, it's being forced in. It's the air pressure. It's the atmospheric pressure forcing it in past the low pressure area that's being created. Anyone that says otherwise is an idiot. That's hardly opinionated at all. Richard, on your twin turbo 454 tests, were those 35s or 45s? I've only run twin 45s on the big block. We never ran twin 35s on it. I don't think GT35s would be enough for a big block. John, I appreciate you guys showing up, man. That's why we're all here, right? Everybody's here to talk and learn, argue about air pressure. Richard, would you consider revisiting the remote turbo testing using an injector and a coil by the turbo to spool it? I've seen guys did that on the GTP cars, and it worked pretty well. I think I might have spoken with Sean that worked for SVO, Paul. The excuse you can use for spending your wife's stimulus money on those 265 AFRs is that they give better fuel mileage and they'll make the car run cooler. Yeah, hopefully everybody's watched the big block video. Zip tie Jedi. I'm looking at buying a boosted 01 2-valve Mustang. It has a Vortec V2, a dynoed at 338 horsepower with 8 pounds of boost. So that about right for a stock 2-valve with just a blower and exhaust. That probably is right, because I think that thing's probably like 200 NA. Have you done vacuuming the exhaust? Or we tried to extract extra exhaust out? We did try that one time with a set of mufflers that a guy had that had little propellers on them. And we're like, why do you put the propellers in the way of the exhaust? He goes, no, the propellers are going to spin and they're going to draw exhaust out. We're like, yeah, but what's spinning the propellers? He said, well, the exhaust is. I said, so the exhaust is spinning the propellers, and then the spinning propeller is drawing the exhaust out. I said, I want you to think about that for a minute and tell me if what you're describing is not a perpetual motion machine. And if it is, because I pointed it out to you, I get half of the revenue and we're going to be very, very rich. But what you're describing is not possible. Are quick spool valves the best of both worlds? Most street turbo applications are already very responsive. So you don't need to have, unless you're trying to do a street one with like a 96 millimeter single turbo that you also want to make like, I don't know, 1500 or 2000 horsepower with, but that's not really the definition of a street motor. The pressure section argument is like the hot cold argument. The cold doesn't really exist. The thing that took me a while to understand is when I was learning about, way back when I was learning about reflected waves, and we have a negative pressure wave traveling up after the intake valve opens, up the length of the intake runner. It reaches the plenum, and rarefaction or rarefication, you can use both of those, happens. And basically what happens is the negative pressure wave expands, leaving a negative pressure zone. So a negative pressure wave expands, leaving a negative pressure zone, and then the surrounding high pressure area fills that in, creating a positive pressure wave, which that travels back down and arrives at the right time, and we get extra cylinder filling. But it took me a long time to come to grips with the fact that a negative pressure wave was traveling to begin with, and that it was expanding when it reaches the plenum. I didn't personally do a leaf blower, but the guys at West Tech way back, long before Freiberger or any of these guys had done any of this stuff, some guy brought it in and was going to supercharge his SHO Taurus motor with a leaf blower. He only had one, and it was electric. And you know, obviously we would give him the whole, you know, how long is the extension cord got to be, all that stuff. But we told him, look, we're like, look, if you could, that will blow air, but the leaf blower was not designed to produce pressure. It doesn't seal well enough to produce a lot of pressure. So you're not going to build a lot of boost. The other thing is the flow rate of the leaf blower is not, I said, you need to do calculations on what the airflow requirement is of your 220 or 30 horsepower SHO V6, and then what the flow rate is of that leaf blower. I said, so it might be able to supply enough, you know, positive airflow to enhance this thing at like 2,000 RPM. I said, but it's probably not going to keep doing that at 6,000 RPM or 7,000 RPM. And so it's a different thing. What's the most power you can make on a ProCharge 502 big block on pump gas? I don't know. I never use the words most and pump gas together. That's not a thing. You can't make a lot of power with pump gas because you don't have the timing in it, and it's not going to be safe. And I'm hoping that you have ring gap in this thing, and then it is intercooled, and you'd be so much better off running E85 on it, because then you could make real power and do what the supercharger is supposed to do. Compound leaf blowers, that's what you need. That's what he needed. He needed more than one leaf blower. And that's what Freiberger ended up doing when they did it too. I think that they had 2 gas-powered leaf blowers. No, all of the turbo kits all bolt on with simple hand tools, complete with the nuts, bolts, and gaskets. I've not tested one of the centrifugal blowers with the CVT stuff. The guys from ProCharger have one like that, but I've never run one. Yeah, I don't like running high boost stuff on 91. Some guys do it, but I know boat guys do it with low static compression and you know, really cold lake water and an intercooler. And they also have a blower that's designed that has fuel running through it that helps cool the charge. And you know, they actually run more timing than, I know, talking to Brule, they run more timing than I certainly would in them, but they seem to get away with it. So Rex, I would say that you need to run very conservative timing and then sneak up on it and see how it goes. I don't think I've ever run an Ultradyne cam, Joseph. Yeah, fascist. I agree. Sometimes it's a pain for a lot of guys to get E85, and I have to say, I ran my Vortex supercharged Mustang on pump gas its whole life. I never. The only time we ever put any kind of race gas mix in it was when I ran it in the Silver State, or when we were taking it to the track. Like I ran it out at El Mirage, and we ran it at the drag strip a few times, and then we would put good gas in it then. But I mean, I ran the Silver State race. Well, I did have a race gas mix it, but it's only running 7 pounds. But its whole life it ran around boosted with no intercooler and pump gas. So I guess it is possible. Oh, hit and run. We go to the gas station and get E85. There's one right around the corner from West Tech where we do testing. So I just go up and fill up 5-gallon jugs. The E85 in California is a lot less than pump gas is. Pump gas now is getting up near $4 a gallon. It's ridiculous. But E85, the last time I bought it was $2.50 or something. We didn't see. I did a comparison between 91 and E85 on NA motors, and I didn't see almost any change in power. We see some stuff down low, and I think that that's from cooling. We see a big change in power on boosted motors, supercharged, turbocharged motors, even before we change the timing. And I've run comparisons between E85 and race gas, so we can run timing with the race gas, and they want to run the same timing. Mark, how much timing are you running on the NA motor on the 4200? I do watch Cletus's stuff. Yes, I think 460 bottom end will stand up to 6 to 8 pounds without any problem. The air fuel ratio is, yeah, it needs to be 11.5 to 1, and the timing needs to be right. Send you a drum of E85. I mean, and I've tried this. I bet I've tried this 20 times. When we go from race gas or pump gas to E85, even before you make any changes in timing, as long as the air fuel on the gas scale, and that seems a hard thing for guys to understand, is that no, it's the stoichiometric value is different, so it has to be a different. No, it's not. You're just thinking about it differently. This is the same air fuel. When we run E85, it's always like 35 or 40 horsepower just from the fuel before we change any timing. Corey, both of those work. I have a video up on air to air, air to water. That's more a function of what you can fit. Nick, I don't think you'd see a change from E100 to E85. I don't think you'd see even more charge cooling. Once you get to where it's cooled, it seems to be pretty cooled. Because then if you change it from, let's say your charge temperature under boost is 100 degrees, what if you got it to 97 degrees? I don't know that would change much. NA, the 4200 only wants 18 degrees of timing. I find that hard to believe. I've never seen any motor run best with 18 degrees of timing. But we'll find out. I mean, it doesn't matter to me what everybody else that runs. I don't even put a lot of stock into that. Obviously, I listen to what people say, and they've been testing longer than I have on that particular combination, whether that's a Buick or a 4200 or a rotary or any of those motors. But the procedure that we do on the dyno, I think, is probably the most effective. we'll start out with low timing, and then we'll add timing. And if it makes more power, then we'll add timing. If it makes more power, we'll keep doing that until it doesn't add any more power. And when we're running these things NA on 91 octane, we'll get to where it doesn't make any more power before it would hurt itself, because motors will not continue to respond to timing indefinitely. The boosted motors can continue to increase power with timing until they break. So that's not the way that we do it on the boosted stuff. But once we know what the thing wants, what like if like on an LS motor, it makes best power normally, the ones that we run, at about 29 degrees. Now we're running these things cold, but the horsepower peak at around 29, and depending on the head, sometimes the 317 heads want more timing. They'll want 30 or 31. And if we're running a carbureted one with an MSD, the timing is more than it is than we run with a Holly. But again, we don't care about that number. We just know that if we add and it makes power, we keep adding, and then it goes, okay, well, I'm done. I'm done making power. This is how much timing I'm going to run. And this is where we stop. Once I know what that NA timing is, we then know how much to take away under boost. And with most boosted stuff, like on an LS, you're looking at something in the 20-degree range, or low 20s to below 20. On pump gas, it's going to be lower than that. And then as you go up in boost, you take away more timing. It's not rocket science, because if I can do it, obviously anybody can understand it. The CHI 208 head make best power at 17 degrees of time. I've never seen 17 degrees of timing. Maybe at 10 or 12 pounds of boost with that head is where it would want timing. I've run those CHI heads and they didn't want anywhere near 17 degrees of timing. Yeah, a smaller chamber is going to want less timing. A 4-valve motor could want less timing. But even on a when we ran all the 4-valve Fords, and when we ran all of the Coyotes, they don't run a whole bunch. Like none of them run timing in the teens. Lots of guys run different gas for driving around on the street and then going to the track, so they have a switch that they can do. Some guys, even with the nitrous, will run better fuel as the fuel augmentation with the nitrous. They'll run it on 91, and then they only put race gas in when they're adding the nitrous. Yeah, I've never seen an LS motor want 34 degrees unless it would be a carbureted one with an MSD, and not because that's actually a real number. It's because there's delay in the MSD that is losing about 2 degrees or so of timing. And we see that with a lot of the distributors and amplifiers and stuff too. Yeah, and the amount of timing that you run under light throttle and cruise may be really high. I remember looking at the numbers on my Crane Interceptor and being amazed that on my 5-liter Mustang, that it was running, timing in the mid 40s, like under cruise and stuff. So it puts a lot of timing in it while you're just cruising and there's no load on it, because it's not going to detonate. Will two 454s with the same part configuration have the exact same timing curve? They should respond to the same amount of timing. Mike, the carb with the MSD it doesn't really want more timing. It wants what timing it wants, but the MSD, the number that we're seeing on the MSD is not the same as the number that we're seeing on the Holly HP. We didn't mark it, but it's probably very, very comparable. It's just that there's delay in the going through the timing on the MSD. 454 board, 60, 781 head. Is it a stock 781 head, or is it a ported one? 10-1, 850 carb. That's a pretty small cam. But yeah, somebody was saying, Warfighter was saying 450 and 550 foot-pounds. That's probably fairly close. I know it's a really long 5 minutes. I've been on for a long time. Anthony, you can convert vacuum. You can convert flow numbers taken at one vacuum level to another. They give you, Superflow gives you a conversion to do that. A lot of stuff we flow, especially if it's big, we'll flow at only 5 inches, and then we convert it to a number at 28 inches. I don't think E85 makes as much as methanol does. Okay, time to go. Thank you guys for showing up. I will be back tomorrow. Hopefully everybody took a look at the video. If you haven't, go out. Here's what I want you to do. It's Friday night. You're not doing anything else. You ain't got no job. You got nothing to do. Go out and tell like 6 or 7 million of your friends to watch that video. If you could just do that for me, that would be awesome. I will see you guys tomorrow night.